Hi everyone, and welcome to today's video. We'll continue our series on Tableau for beginners, and today we'll be looking at connecting to data sources in Tableau, and we'll cover the following concepts: Tableau interface overview, data source types, and connecting to different data sources in Tableau. Let's go over the Tableau interface. So I navigate to Tableau, and when you open up Tableau for the first time, you get a view that looks like this. So you have the Connect tab, and this is where you connect to different data sources. So you have file-based connections, Microsoft Excel text file. You also have connecting to a server, Google Drive, amongst others. You also have this Open tab, and this is where you can open up recent projects you've worked on. So if you save files locally or save files to the cloud, you can open them up using this tab. Then you also have the Discover tab. And here you see resources, right? Like you can check out. So you have chat types, how-to videos. These are resources you can use to learn more about Tableau. You also have Vis of the day, blog posts, sample data sets. These are all community resources that you can explore, right? And you can use these data sets, for example, connect to them, use them to build charts and visuals in Tableau. So this is an overview of Tableau interface, right? And we'll see more of this as we go on with the video. So I go back to my slide and let's look at data source types. So a data set, which can be referred to as data source or database, right, in a Tableau context, simply contains the data you use in building your visuals, right? And this data sets, right, it can come in different forms. So you have spreadsheets. Example include Excel, Google Sheets, Apple numbers. You also have databases. So this can be SQL Server, PostgreSQL, MySQL, etc. Then you have cloud data. So this can be data from a Snowflake database, or it could be a Redshift warehouse, amongst others. Then you have big data platforms. This can be platforms like Hadoop, Spark, etc. Then you have web data connectors. So if you have data on a website, right, you can build a connector in Tableau that helps you access this data. And then you have other data sources. So things like PDF, text files, JSON files, they all fall under this category. So all these data sources, they are grouped into two broad categories. So first, you have the file-based connections. And file-based connections in Tableau, they include Excel, text files. So this can be CSV, .txt files, amongst others. You also have JSON files. You have Microsoft Access files, PDFs, spatial files, and statistical files. You can also have TDE hyper files or TDS, TDXS files. So these are all Excel workbooks and extracts in Tableau. And we'll learn more of these as we go on with the course. So when should you use file-based connections? When should one use these file-based connections? So one scenario, right, is when you're working with static data that doesn't change often. So you can use a file-based connection in that scenario. Also, when you're carrying out ad hoc or one-time analysis, the file-based connection is suitable for this kind of request, right? Then you also have situations where your data is not sensitive. So you can also use a file-based connection in this instance. Then there are times when you just don't have resources, right, to work with a server. So you can opt to just work with a file like Excel, CSV, right, etc. So now let's look at demo, right, connecting to different file tabs. So first, we'll start with Excel. So I'll navigate to my Tableau file, and I'll come on to the top left, right? Here I have connect, and I'll connect to an Excel file. So I'll come on here and click on Microsoft Excel. So I click on this, and I'll navigate to my project folder, my data folder, right, which is this. I have an Excel file called superstore.slxx. This contains several tabs, right, or sheets. So I click on open, and Excel tries to bring in this file into Tableau. So here, before I look at the data, right, let's look at this view. So you have these tabs up here, file, data, window, help, right? You can just open these up and try to close the data connection or bring in new data, right? Open a new window, etc. Then you also have this tab here, right? So you can undo, redo, refresh data, right? Save data with these icons that are here. And then you have your connection, right? So this is simply the data I connected to, which is called Superstore data. It's an Excel file, right? And then here you have the data source also. And this simply is the interface where you can drag your data into. So let's say I want to connect to my other sheets. So these are all sheets in one Excel file, right? Superstore data. So let's say I want to connect to the others table, right? Before I connect, I can try to do a preview by clicking on this icon here, right? So I click on this and you see a preview of this table. So I can drag this across so you see it in detail. So this shows me a preview, right? So I can see that I have 9,994 rows and 13 columns or fields. And this is a preview of the first 10,000 rows. So it can show you like, yeah, a preview of the first 10,000 rows. So here, right, I can close this view. Since I've gotten a view of the data, it looks okay. Then I can drag this into this tab, right? So I drag it in here. And now, right, you have at the bottom, you have this interface, right? Here, when I scroll down, it just contains metadata, right, about my data sets. So it shows you different columns, the fields, data types, the tables is coming from, right? And then on here, right, this is where I have my actual data. So I'll click on update now. And this shows me my actual data, right? So when I scroll to the right, you can see all the fields for my data. And if I want to, I can come on here and remove this, right? And bring in another one, maybe products, for example, next to view also. And you can do all that kind of transformations, right? And next, I can click on this, go to my sheet, right? And start building reports and analyzing my data. So this is how you connect to Excel files in Tableau. And if I want to, I can also rename my table, right? So instead of product superstore data, I can just call this products table. And this does not affect the source. It just changes what I see in Tableau, right? But the source still remains the same, superstore data and product sheets. So if I want to bring in a new source, right? I can come onto this drop down here and choose new data source. So I click on this and I want to connect to a text file, right? So based on this, right? Next, look at a text file. And a text file can be CSV file, a .txt file, a TSV file, amongst others. So in this scenario, let's connect to a CSV file. So I come on here, drop down, data source, and I'll choose text file as my source. So I have two CSV files in my folder, calendar and superstore. But in this case, right, I'll bring in the superstore table and hit OK. And this creates a connection, right, to the superstore file. So note that I had two different files, right? And Tableau brought both of them in, calendar and superstore. They are different CSV files. But since a CSV file is just one table, you can have only one sheet, right, in a CSV file. So it brings in both of them, and I can choose the one I want. So this superstore, right, it brings it into the view. And I can scroll, look at my metadata, and check out the data also. This looks good also. And you can go on to your sheets and start building reports and analysis. So next, let's look at how to connect to the JSON file. So JSON is simply JavaScript's object notation, and it consists of key value pairs, right? It's a way of storing data that comes mostly from web platforms. So when I come onto Tableau, I want to bring in a JSON file. The same drill, come onto this drop down, and I'll choose unit data source. I'll come down here and choose JSON file as my source. And in my folder, I have a file, right? It's called station information 9.json. So I'll choose this and hit open. And Tableau brings this into the view, right? So this shows you different schema levels, and it determines the dimension and measures available for analysis. So here I have 4 different schema levels, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I choose the last one, for example, it highlights everything. I can uncheck this, right? Uncheck this, for example, and just bring in the first 2 levels. But in this case, I want everything, right? So I can just come on here. But let's say I want the first 3 schema levels. I can just choose this one, right? And bring this in. So I hit OK to bring this into the view. And here, right, you can see my JSON file. So it's showing me the different fields and their values. You can check out the metadata also. So far, we've connected to 3 sources, right? So when I come here, for example, I can switch between my views. I can switch to Superstore, for example, and see my data here, right, and work with it. I can switch to station, my JSON file, right? I can switch also to my CSV file if I want to. So back to my slide. Next, let's look at how to connect to a PDF file using Tableau. So I'll come back to Tableau, drop down, new data source, and I'll choose PDF file as my source. So in the data folder, you also have the PDF file, right? And this data, right, I'll put that in the description. So you see the data source in the description, and you can follow along if you want to. So I'll click on this PDF file and hit open. And this tab comes up, right, asking you if you want to connect to all the pages in the PDF file, a single page, or a range of pages, right? So let's say I want page 1 to 3, for example. I can click 1 here and click 3, for example. And it brings in the first 3 pages, right? So let's go with this, page 1 to 3, for example, and I hit OK. So Tableau brings the data into the view, right? So page 1 to 3. So it's showing that I have multiple tables on different pages, which is interesting. And I would like to point out, right, that the PDF connection is not always efficient, right? There are times where you might have anomalies. So it's best to always cross-check the data and see that it makes sense. So page 1, table 1, when I click on this, for example, let's see what it shows me. 46 rows, right? So from 0 down to 46, 47 rather, right? 47, that's the last row here. So I expect the next table to start from 47. That's 48, right? When I check this now, I'm seeing that it starts from 15 instead. So it's duplicating my data, right? When I check table 2, now I'm seeing that it's 48 that it starts from. So it's best to always cross-check your data when working with PDF data sources. So I can bring this to the view, for example, and check out the data, look at the different fields, their values, etc. Then you can also see that the column names, right, is not named correctly. When I check my source, this is my source file. My source file, right? You can see it has headers, year, metabolites, etc. But here, Tableau is ignoring the title. So you have to come on here and rename it yourself. So I can come on here, drop down, and rename this, right, to something else. Also, I'm saying that Tableau is combining these 2 fields together. Year plus the metabolites, they are combined together. So you're seeing some issues with this, right? So it's always great to review PDF connections, as it's not always efficient. Then next, let's look at how to connect to spatial files. So spatial files, right? This can include shape files, JSON files, GeoJSON files, zip files, topo.json files, etc. And when connecting to spatial files, right? So spatial files, in simple terms, are just data about geographical points across the globe. And you have some things to note, right? For example, for shape files, you have to contain .shp files, .shs files, .dbf files, and .plj files in the data folder for it to work accurately. The same applies for these other different types. So if I come back to Tableau and come down to the drop down, new source, and spatial file as my source, right? I have this folder in here that contains spatial files. So I'll click on it, nga. I have a .shp file. I'll open this up. So let's see if it works accurately. So you can see, right, it brings in my data. I can see different fields, admin name, and scroll to the end, right, down to geometry. And if you check the data folder, right, open up that folder, you see I have a .dbf file, right? I also have a .plj file here, .plj, .dbf, right? I also have a .shp and a .shs files, right? So this enables the file to work correctly in Tableau. And then you can take this into your sheets, right, and start creating analysis and reports. So it's also important to note that Tableau supports other spatial formats like Spatialite, Oracle Spatial, and PostGIS. Now, the next type of connections in Tableau are the server-based connections. So you have two broad categories of connections: file-based connections, which we just went through, and server-based connections. And these include sources like Tableau Server, Microsoft SQL Server, PostgreSQL, Amazon Redshift, BigQuery, Azure Synapse, Snowflake, Google Sheets, and web data connectors. Now, when should one use a server-based connection? So you use this when your data is updated frequently, right? So actual business transactions, right? That's a good use case for server-based connections. Then also when you have multiple users who need to access the same data, it's best to work with a server. Also, when you have sensitive data and data that requires secure access control, then server-based connections is a great fit. And then when you need to schedule data refreshes and automate your workflows, it's more efficient and effective to work with server-based connections. Also, when you need real-time data, you can use platforms like Apache Kafka, Flink, right, etc. Use that to build solutions that provide real-time data effectively and efficiently using server-based connections. Then when you work with large amounts of data that require high performance, that's big data, right? Then it's best to work with server connections also. So there are some requisites, right, when working with server-based connections. So first, you need your server name, database name, and connection credentials to properly access these data sources. Also, the server must be running and accessible on the network, right? If it's not running, then you won't be able to access it. Then also, you need to have the necessary permissions to access the server. So if you don't have access to the server, right, you can't really access the data that's in it. So you have to have access to access the server. And then you need to have the correct network settings, IP address, host name, port numbers, or protocols. And in some instances, you might need to install and configure necessary drivers or software on your local machine to establish this connection. Now let's go through demos, right? So first, let's connect to Google Sheets using Tableau. So I'll come back to Tableau Public and I'll choose new data source. This time I'll scroll down, right? and come down to where you have to a server. So if you don't see these three options, right, you might see just OData, then you see more. You can click on more to open up the other two. So I'll come on here and click on Google Drive as my source, right? I want to link to a file in my Google Drive. So I click on Google Drive. This opens up your browser and tries to access your Google account. So I'll come on here and click on my Google account to grant access, right? So you might need to authenticate and then allow Tableau access to your Google Drive, right? So this done, right? I can exit this view and go back to Tableau. And it shows me the files that are currently in my drive, right? So I have just two folders, one folder and one file. So you can upload a sample file to your drive just to test this out, right? Or connect to an existing file. That can work. So in my case, this sales.csv. I click on this, click on it twice, right? To bring it into Tableau. And this loads my data, right? Sales.csv into Tableau. Now I can use this, right, to create analysis, create charts, create graphs, etc. Now back to my slide. Let's go through connecting to web data. So in Tableau, right, you can use web data connectors. So when I go back to Tableau and I come to the top left, right here, and click on this icon, come out to this view. So you have web data connectors, right? And these are tools that allow users to connect to web data sources and extract data directly into Tableau for analysis. So they enable you to extract data from any web-based source that provides a web API. So any source that you can access via HTTP, right? You can build a connector for that source and bring data from there into Tableau. And most times you have people in the community, right? Developers that just build these connectors and provide them to the community to use. You can also build your own connector if you have the skills, right? But that's beyond the scope of this course. So I'll go onto my driver, my browser rather, come onto the first tab, right? So this platform, this website, right? It's a community platform where people have just put the connectors they built for different platforms. And I'll put a link to this in the description. You can access it, right, and explore and see which data you might need from here. So for this example, I will use the New York Times bestseller list connector. I'll come on here and click on this, right? And it opens up this tab. Come onto the browser and just copy the URL. And I'll come back to Tableau, right? I'll click on this option, web data connector. So I click on this. So if you come on here and put any website, for example, let me say tableau.com, for example, and enter, right? So it loads the websites, but then I can't really do anything with this. I can't really see any table or stuff, right? So you need to put a proper connector to bring in data. So I click on this and I paste in the URL I copied from my browser. I paste that in here, right? And then enter. And it opens up the web page. So I come on here and click on this icon here, right? Bestseller. This icon here, click on it, right? And it tries to establish a connection using that connector, and it brings in the required data. So here I'm seeing updates now automatically. I'll click on the first option, update now, to bring in data into my view. And now you can see my data, right, brought in using the data connector. So you have category ID, category name, and you can scroll and look at all the different fields. You can now use this to build your reports and charts in Tableau. And lastly, we'll look at how to connect to the database. In this case, I'll use SQL Server, but you can use the same workflow, right, for other different databases, whether cloud or local. So I'll come on here, right? So when I come back to this home view, You only have 3 servers in Tableau Public. You can't really access any other server options. So Tableau Public is limited in that you can't save files locally. You have to save it to the Tableau Public server. And also, you only have access to limited data connectors. So Tableau provides a 14-day free trial to the community, right? And you can use this to explore Tableau Desktop. So I have Tableau Desktop installed, and I'll put a link in the description. So I did a walkthrough that you can use to install it and test out the 14-day free trial. So I'm currently on the 14-day free trial, and it's completely free. And you don't have to put in your card details. You just go on there, put your email, put your details, and just get the software. And you can see I'm currently on the free trial, right? Ends in 11 days. So I'll click on continue trial, and it opens up Tableau Desktop. And immediately, right, you can see a stark difference, right? You have more options here. You have more options here, right? So you have options to connect to more file connectors, more server connectors, right? When I click on more here, for example, you see you can connect to workbooks, right? But this is not present. This is not present in Tableau Public. It just stops as these files. You don't have that here. Also, you have just 3 servers here. But in Tableau Desktop, right, you can connect to several other connectors, right? There are several options here. And if for an instance, you don't see your database here, for example, you can come on here and use a JDBC or ODBC connector to connect to those other platforms, right? So in this case, I want a SQL Server connector. So I'll come on here and type SQL Server. Now choose the second option, right? SQL Server. So I click on this and it brings up this tab, right? This is my server name and database is called Superstore, right? So just go into my SQL Server here, right? And connect. So I'll show you the view here. So this is my database, right? You have a called Superstore. And in this database, you have 5 tables, calendar down to products. So I'll connect to this in Tableau, right? Put in my credentials, server name, database, and authentication. I will use Windows authentication, right? Since it's a local server. But if you're connected to a cloud server, right, you come on here and choose second option where you put your password and username, right? And then use that to connect to your instance. Then you have the option require SSL. SSL means secure socket layer, and it's a security protocol that helps you establish the secure and encrypted connection between your web server and your web browser, right? So in this case, Tableau is trying to secure a connection that's helping you protect the data source, right? So that hackers cannot intercept the data. In this case, it's useful when you're working with data that's sensitive, like financial data, health data, amongst others. But in our case, I'll just ignore this, right? Leave it unchecked also. Then hit sign in. And this opens up my data source, right? These are the 5 tables, calendar down to products. Like I'm bringing a table in here, for example, and start working with it, right? So update now. And you can see my table. I can start building charts and reports with this data, all right? So for this lesson, we've gone through the Tableau interface, right? How to use the interface to connect to data, etc. We've also looked at the different data sources in Tableau. You have file-based connections and server-based connections. We've seen when and when not to use them. There are the sections and examples also. And lastly, we looked at how to connect to different data sources. We went through file types like Excel, CSV, spatial files, PDFs, amongst others. We also went through server connections like SQL Server, Web Data Connectors, and Google Drive. In the next lesson, we'll look at how to prepare data in Tableau. Thank you all for your time, and I'll catch you on the next lesson.